Right.
Anyway, let's talk about when should you use background jobs. I think first, let's start with the basics. Let's define what we're talking about with background job. So,
Well, I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go.
Well, I mean, I would say anything that is not happening in sync when we're talking web development,
Yeah.
anything that's not happening in sync with the web request is a background job. That is one thing. So it could be there could be scheduled background jobs that say cron kicks off or some other scheduling service kicks off, or it could be like event based. So something happens in your front end, or a customer does something that then triggers this background job to happen or spawns multiple jobs to happen. So it's basically something that's not happening in sync with a web request or in sync with whatever user input is doing. It's a separate process that gets spawned to take care of work. So, and background implying that the user doesn't see what's going on.
Right.
So that's how I define background jobs.
Right. And so what really is the purpose of background jobs? Why would I use them at all?
So I'll put in my 2 cents.
Sure.
And that is basically to keep your front end processing. And by front end processing, I mean like your main web requests coming in from users to be unhindered with taking that load. So it keeps them nice and fast and efficient. So ideally, there's all these reports that say, users detect when it's your web request turns in greater than 100 milliseconds or whatever the metric is. Basically,
Yeah.
it needs to be as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that, your processes that are serving your users on the quote unquote front end need to quickly receive the request, do as little processing as possible to get that request and send it back to them within that, whatever your metric is, 100 milliseconds or whatever. So they should not be burdened with contacting an email provider, contacting an API, because that means they can't handle those front end requests. So you put those in a queuing system for background jobs to handle. So the reason is to keep the user interface, the user experience fast and optimized.
Right. So this is all about the user, really. It's about making sure the user has a good experience. That's kind of where all this came from. And if I'm going to generate a report for somebody off of large data and they request the report, they shouldn't have to sit there and wait for the report to be generated before they can do anything else on my site. That's just a bad user experience. And so that's when you start looking at, parallel processing, background jobs, offloading, that kind of thing.
And it even gets worse, because imagine that you chose to have them wait for that web request to happen. Well, now that process on your server is now doing all of this work. So that means that that process is not available to receive other requests coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So now maybe you need to have a 200 core server or a 500 core server. It just explodes exponentially if that one server is doing everything within the span of the web request.
Right.
Whereas separating the background jobs now, those processes for your front end they're super quick, super efficient. You have metrics ideally or benchmarks to say this must only take this much time to process.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can have this whole bank of servers over here if you need to do the background jobs.
Right. And there's another, I think, important use case where background jobs are almost necessary, and that is when you're scheduling things to happen. Like, I need to send out a notification in an hour for something, or I need to, when this happens on the front end, I need the back end to do this thing and send out some stuff, and so that's another good use of background jobs when you're trying to asynchronously schedule things to happen in the future. So those are, I mean, in my career, those have been the two primary use cases to even think about background jobs. And I can't really think of other use cases where I would start thinking about those. Do you have any others?
No, I mean, unless there's also the aspect of probability of failure may cause you to, I don't know if you'd call that a separate class or not. I think you could probably still put it up under one of those, but meaning that if you have something that's going to potentially fail, like sending, there's not only the time involved in sending an email or uploading something to S3 or interacting with an external API, but what's the probability of failure? Do you want your users to get a 500 error message back from your application, then thinking the whole thing's down when it's just this third-party provider that's having an issue or email slightly delayed? It's much better for the user experience to say, oh, the email's still sending, hasn't sent yet. Well, I'll navigate and do other things in the application while it's doing its thing.
Right. So those are, I think, kind of the basic use cases where you would want to use background jobs.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.